Returning home from war is supposed to be a moment of relief, a moment of quiet victory, a time to finally put down the burden of constant danger and reconnect with the people you love. After months or even years spent in the chaos of combat, a soldier carries not only the physical toll of service, but for him, that sense of homecoming was shattered in an instant. The betrayal was immediate, personal, and unthinkable. The person he trusted most, his wife, was the one who had orchestrated his arrest the second he stepped over the threshold. There is a unique kind of shock that comes from realizing that someone you have built a life with, someone who has shared your dreams, fears, and vulnerabilities, could turn against you so completely. It's not just about legal entanglements or the fear of consequences. It's about the emotional rupture, the sudden collapse of trust that forms the bedrock of intimate relationships. Walking into his house, expecting the warmth and familiarity of home, only to find the FBI waiting for him, is a trauma layered on top of trauma. Every detail becomes a question mark. Why? How long had this been planned? Had everything they shared, the quiet dinners, the personal conversations, the private moments of laughter and pain, been a facade? The mind races through memories, scanning for signs, for clues that were missed, as the heart wrestles with the enormity of betrayal. It's a scenario that feels almost surreal, because in war, the enemy is clear, defined, and understood. At home, the battlefield is hidden in plain sight, and the weapons are trust and deception. The sense of being cornered in your own life is suffocating. The very place that should feel safe becomes a chamber of fear and disbelief. This kind of betrayal is not just legal or social, it's deeply personal, cutting to the core of identity and loyalty. The betrayal is compounded by the timing. Immediately upon returning, when vulnerability is highest and the mind longs for the sanctuary of home, the shock is magnified. In that instant, the protagonist's world tilts, and survival is no longer just about physical endurance. It becomes about navigating emotional upheaval, mental calculation, and the raw desire for justice. Every thought, every reaction is filtered through the lens of treachery as he realizes that war has not ended, it has simply shifted arenas, from foreign battlegrounds to the intimate, dangerous battlefield of home. The betrayal at home, especially after the sacrifices of war, becomes a defining crucible for character. It forces him to confront not just the legal threat, but the moral and emotional dimensions of trust, love, and resilience. It is the moment when the narrative's tension solidifies, drawing readers into the raw, unfiltered human experience of being wronged by the person who should have been your safe harbor. The emotional weight of this betrayal carries the story forward, providing a foundation for every subsequent action, every calculated response, and every strategy to reclaim autonomy and dignity. It is the betrayal at home that ignites the fire for resilience, cunning, and eventual retribution, making the protagonist's journey both intensely personal and universally compelling. The moment the FBI steps into the picture, the stakes shift dramatically from personal betrayal to a clash with institutional power, a confrontation that amplifies tension and urgency. Authority is no longer abstract, it is concrete, organized, and overwhelming. For someone just returned from war, trained to navigate danger on foreign soil, the expectation is that the battlefield is predictable and the enemy identifiable. But when law enforcement, the FBI, an emblem of legal and national authority, appears at your doorstep, the rules of engagement are rewritten, and the sense of being trapped becomes immediate and suffocating. This isn't a matter of merely defending oneself in the confines of home. It's a confrontation with a system designed to enforce obedience, a system that wields far more resources, intelligence, and reach than any individual could muster. It's a test of wits, courage, and resilience on a completely different plane.
The involvement of a federal agency adds layers of complexity, both practically and psychologically. It introduces the looming threat of arrest, investigation, and potential imprisonment, turning what should be a moment of reunification into a high-stakes scenario where every word, every gesture, and every decision could have irreversible consequences. The protagonist must quickly reconcile the betrayal of his spouse with the reality of external authority. He is no longer dealing solely with deception in private life, but with a legal and procedural machinery that could constrict his freedom before he even has a chance to respond. In this context, the story explores the tension between personal morality and systemic power. There is a nuanced psychological battle at play, the need to defend oneself against institutional authority while grappling with the emotional devastation of being betrayed by the person you trust most. Strategically, the encounter with the FBI transforms the narrative into one of calculated resistance and survival. Every action must be measured, every reaction scrutinized. Knowledge of procedure, observation, and mental acuity become vital tools. The protagonist cannot rely on brute force or instinct alone. He must navigate the intricate web of legal boundaries, anticipate the agent's movements, and leverage every possible advantage to protect himself. This is a battlefield of intellect and psychological fortitude as much as it is one of physical presence. The story gains tension through this delicate interplay. The protagonist is not simply reacting, but outthinking, outmaneuvering, and reclaiming control in a situation designed to strip him of autonomy. Moreover, the clash between authority and individual agency resonates with universal themes of power, control, and justice. Readers are drawn into the struggle because it speaks to a fundamental fear, the idea that one could be rendered powerless not by enemies on a distant battlefield, but by a system meant to protect society. It raises questions of trust, legality, and the limits of authority, forcing readers to root for the protagonist as he confronts forces far larger than himself. The narrative tension is heightened by the contrast between the overwhelming institutional power of the FBI and the protagonist's resourcefulness, mental strength, and unyielding determination not to be defeated. This dynamic serves as a critical turning point in the story. The protagonist's confrontation with authority is not just a test of survival, it becomes a crucible for character, sharpening resolve, heightening stakes, and transforming the personal betrayal into a high-stakes narrative of resilience, strategy, and reclamation of control. The tension between legal authority and individual cunning forms the backbone of suspense, keeping readers fully invested in every decision, every maneuver, and every eventual triumph. Even in the face of betrayal and overwhelming authority, resilience becomes the protagonist's defining trait, a combination of mental toughness, strategic thinking, and unyielding determination that allows him to navigate what seems like an impossible situation. Returning from war, he has already endured trials that tested the limits of endurance, courage, and adaptability. The battlefield, with all its chaos and unpredictability, instilled in him a discipline and a capacity for quick thinking under pressure that now become essential tools for confronting the betrayal at home. Whereas soldiers rely on training to survive in combat zones, here that same training is repurposed for an entirely different war, a war of wits, timing, and psychological maneuvering. He cannot afford to act impulsively or emotionally. Every move must be calculated, every reaction deliberate, because one misstep could allow the betrayal to gain irreversible control over his life. Resilience manifests in mindset and action. Mentally, he refuses to succumb to despair or self-pity. The shock of his spouse's betrayal and the sudden appearance of the FBI could easily paralyze anyone, but he channels the surge of anger and confusion into focus. Instead of being overwhelmed, he begins to assess the situation critically. Who are the actors? What are their motives? And what resources do they control? By detaching emotionally enough to analyze strategically while still acknowledging the depth of personal hurt, he transforms vulnerability into clarity. His mind becomes a battlefield map, every corner, every obstacle, every potential ally or adversary plotted and anticipated. Strategically, resilience requires adaptability. The protagonist recognizes that conventional approaches will not work. brute force, emotional confrontation, or naive trust would only play into the hands of those who have plotted against him. He leverages every piece of information, every observation, and every instinct honed in combat to maneuver through the legal and personal traps laid before him. This might mean anticipating the FBI's next move, exploiting procedural nuances, or using psychological insight to predict behavior, all tactics rooted in experience, preparation, and mental discipline. The story demonstrates that resilience is not just endurance, but intelligent action, the ability to convert knowledge and experience into a survival strategy even under extreme pressure.
Furthermore, resilience is reinforced by an unwavering refusal to be a passive victim. While the betrayal and authority clash could easily overwhelm someone, the protagonist channels his energy into reclaiming agency. He refuses to let the betrayal define him, refusing to allow anger and shock to immobilize him. Instead, every thought, every step, every decision is aligned with the goal of regaining control and asserting autonomy. This is the essence of resilience, not simply surviving adversity, but turning it into a force that fuels action, sharpens judgment, and strengthens resolve. Finally, this resilience resonates with readers on a deeper level. It is not only about strategy or strength, it is about the human capacity to confront immense challenges, internal and external, without surrendering to despair. The protagonist embodies the universal struggle of taking control of one's life even when the odds are stacked, reminding readers that true strength often lies in composure, foresight, and the courage to act decisively in the face of betrayal, danger, and uncertainty. His resilience becomes the engine driving the story forward, ensuring that the narrative remains tense, compelling, and emotionally charged as every action taken is a testament to his refusal to be defeated. The theme of revenge and retribution is at the core of this story, transforming personal betrayal into a calculated journey of justice and empowerment. After experiencing the profound shock of his spouse's betrayal and the overwhelming presence of the FBI, the protagonist is not content with simply surviving. He seeks to reclaim his autonomy and ensure that those who wronged him face the consequences of their actions. This aspect of the narrative is crucial because it shifts the story from one of passive victimhood to active engagement, highlighting the human desire to restore balance when trust has been violated and power has been abused. Revenge, in this context, is not merely about emotional satisfaction. It is a strategic, deliberate process that requires foresight, planning, and careful execution. Every decision the protagonist makes in pursuit of retribution is informed by his understanding of both human nature and institutional systems. He recognizes that impulsive retaliation would likely backfire, potentially worsening his situation and handing victory to those who orchestrated his downfall. Instead, he applies the same discipline, patience, and tactical thinking that defined his military service to the battlefield of personal justice. Observing, calculating, and exploiting weaknesses in the system or in the behavior of his betrayers becomes a form of empowerment, turning vulnerability into leverage. This careful orchestration elevates the story from a simple tale of anger and payback into a sophisticated narrative of strategy, intelligence, and moral reclamation. Revenge also serves as a lens through which readers can explore the emotional complexity of betrayal. It is not enough for the protagonist to be vindicated legally. The satisfaction of taking measured action against those who wronged him provides a deeper, almost primal sense of resolution. Every maneuver, every countermeasure, and every psychological tactic employed to regain control is layered with the emotional weight of having been deeply wronged. The reader is drawn into this journey, experiencing the tension and satisfaction of witnessing justice unfold on the protagonist's terms. This dynamic keeps the narrative engaging, as the stakes are not only personal but profoundly human, the restoration of dignity, trust, and agency. Importantly, the story frames revenge not as reckless violence or impulsive anger, but as a disciplined, intelligent response to injustice. It emphasizes the true retribution is thoughtful, measured, and effective, requiring both patience and insight.
The protagonist's actions are carefully calibrated to ensure that the balance is restored without unnecessary collateral damage, reflecting a moral dimension that resonates with readers. This approach elevates the story beyond simple titillation, highlighting the interplay between emotion, ethics, and strategy in moments of crisis.
The journey of retribution in this narrative ultimately underscores a broader theme of empowerment. It demonstrates that even when systems of authority and personal relationships are weaponized against an individual, resilience, intelligence, and calculated action can restore equilibrium. Readers are compelled not only by the suspense of the protagonist's maneuvers, but also by the underlying message. Betrayal and injustice, no matter how severe, do not have to define one's destiny. The narrative arc of revenge and retribution provides catharsis, intellectual engagement, and emotional satisfaction, making it a central pillar of the story's tension, appeal, and resonance. The emotional and psychological stakes in this story run far deeper than the surface-level drama of betrayal and legal entanglement. What makes the narrative compelling is not just the FBI's sudden involvement or the protagonist's calculated retaliation. It is the intense human experience that unfolds in the wake of such an extraordinary personal violation. Trust, once shattered, leaves a profound mark, altering not only how the protagonist perceives his spouse, but also how he navigates the world around him. The psychological toll of realizing that someone so intimate could orchestrate such a deception is immense, creating a tension that permeates every thought, every interaction, and every decision. It is a landscape of fear, suspicion, and anger, yet it is precisely in navigating this terrain that the story finds its emotional resonance. From the very moment he returns home, the protagonist is thrust into a state of heightened vigilance. Every word spoken by those around him, every movement in his environment becomes potentially loaded with ulterior motives. The betrayal forces him to question not only the intentions of others, but also the reliability of his own perceptions. There is a psychological dissonance at play. The home, traditionally a place of refuge and comfort, is now a site of danger and uncertainty. The story's tension is heightened by this inversion of safety. Readers are drawn into a space where ordinary domestic life is laced with threat, forcing empathy for the protagonist as he negotiates this perilous emotional landscape. The emotional stakes are further compounded by the intensity of anger and hurt he feels towards his spouse. These emotions are not fleeting, they are deep, complicated, and often conflicting. Love and betrayal coexist in a tense, almost unbearable duality. The protagonist's journey is as much about managing these conflicting emotions as it is about outmaneuvering the FBI or planning retribution. This duality adds layers to the story, demonstrating that personal betrayal is rarely simple and that emotional complexity is an inseparable part of high-stakes conflict. It also creates an intimate connection for the reader, who is drawn not just to the suspense of the external conflict, but to the internal struggle for composure, clarity, and agency. Psychologically, the protagonist's ability to transform trauma into strategy highlights resilience and mental fortitude. The narrative explores how extreme stress and emotional upheaval can sharpen focus, enhance problem-solving, and fuel determination when directed purposefully. Readers witness a transformation from shock and disorientation to control and calculated action, which is both satisfying and inspiring. This dimension of psychological mastery elevates the story, turning it into a study of human capability under extraordinary pressure. Finally, the emotional stakes underscore the universality of the experience. While few may face betrayal on such a dramatic scale, everyone can relate to the vulnerability of trust being broken and the desire to reclaim dignity and power. The story resonates because it intertwines action, intellect, and emotional truth, showing that the human response to betrayal is multifaceted, ranging from hurt and disbelief to strategic resilience and ultimate empowerment. These stakes give the narrative its depth, ensuring that the story is compelling not only for its external drama, but for the raw human experience at its core, making every triumph and every calculated maneuver profoundly satisfying.